good evening, depending on what time zone you're listening to our show in. And welcome to another edition of Unlock the Door Radio, where we like to challenge the prevailing notions that seem to hover around the world nowadays, especially the United States, as presented by the mainstream media and other areas of quote-unquote authority. They get their authority from, well, I guess they tell us they have the authority and they are the experts. Well, anyway, tonight I would like to deal with something that's been on everyone's mind. And I know it's been on everyone's mind because if you look through any kind of social media or look through search engines, you'll find out the number one thing on people's minds right now is a little import from Western Africa known as Ebola. Now, Ebola has been around for a while. It's been around for several decades. But for some reason, it was always something that was very concentrated, and it didn't seem to leap out very much. It didn't go out into the general populations and affect thousands and thousands of people. Most of the time, the casualty figures were more in the dozens. But then it would just kind of burn itself out, and you wouldn't hear about it for a few years, and it would come back, and then it'd burn itself out, and you wouldn't hear it for a few years. For some strange reason now, we're getting reports of outbreaks in Sierra Leone, Liberia, Nigeria, Cameroon. Now, Nigeria, I think their outbreaks have been from people coming in with it, although they've instituted some measures to try to stem that tide. The thing is, this is really scaring people, and for good reason, for very good reason. And we're going to get into some of the controversies about this and how this has actually been turned into an election issue. But let's just say Ebola is a virus, a very nasty virus, but one that traditionally was very difficult to get. And now it seems that, I remember, 15, 20 years ago when I first heard about Ebola, it said that pretty much you had to really have some massive contact with this bug in order to acquire it. And that even many of the doctors and personnel were not even wearing all that much protective gear. And still, most of them didn't come down with it. And now we get a situation where we're hearing people who, the nurse down in Texas who had all kinds of protective gear, and she still acquired the virus. Now, this makes me think that maybe there's a new strain. A new strain has developed. Now, I have to say this, in some of the social media, when you talk about this going airborne, which I'll come back to later, a lot of people will say, well, wait a minute. We've had HIV out there for years and years and years. Millions of people carrying the virus. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, dying from it. And it's not gone airborne. But I will note one thing. HIV is really, for the most part, the strains that have been around, is really difficult to get. I mean, there's been cases I've heard of in which a wife was married to a guy that had HIV for quite some time, and she never acquired it, even though they were not using any kind of contraceptions that would prevent it. And this Ebola virus is a little bit different in the sense that with this one now, they're saying that just droplets on your skin or, that you breathe in or something can give it to you. Now, that means this thing is not HIV, okay? It's not the same species or category of virus, which means that using the HIV analogy is really not, it should not really cause people to be all that, comforted. Because if this virus winds up acting like, something like an influenza, versus retrovirus such as HIV, you may have some real problems on your hands. I'm hoping it doesn't get any easier to catch than it seems to be right now, because that could be a very, very deadly situation. In fact, it could be like that that History Channel documentary called After Armageddon. Has anyone ever seen that one? It's on YouTube. If you look up After Armageddon, it's really something that, to me, watching that reminds me of The Walking Dead, with the various sociological explorations of what would happen when the infrastructure of a society falls apart. And we're already seeing some of that infrastructure falling apart in those small African countries today, although they didn't really have a strong infrastructure in the first place. Now, can we rely on our infrastructure, like many experts say, that we can handle an outbreak of this disease? Well, I hope so. But it wouldn't take much to scare people to the point that they might just decide, you know what, I'm not going to work. I'm not going to school. I'm not going to go work at the hospital where I'm a doctor at or something like that, if they're a doctor. And that could actually cause a collapse in the infrastructure and ultimately signal some very major problems, especially in the big cities. But anyway, let's just deal with this little rascal and why people are scared. Now, I'll say this. Statistically, right now, your chance of dying of Ebola, catching Ebola, in almost all parts of the world is so small. I'm sure there's probably more people that got struck by lightning the last few days in the developed world than have acquired Ebola. Okay? That being said, it's still something that's a little scary because it's a very unfamiliar disease. It's not something we're used to. We hear about someone who eats a lot of junk food or doesn't exercise or smokes that dies of a heart attack. We can envision that. Okay? That's something I can sort of, you can just get this picture of someone dying of a heart attack. We're used to it. We've seen it on TV and so forth all the time. It's been described. Most of us know someone who's died of a heart attack. Ebola looks and sounds like something from the X-Files, on the other hand. And let me explain this, why I think this sounds more like an X-Files thing, and maybe this is why it's scaring so many people. Now, here's the symptoms I found looking for it. The first symptoms from day 7 to 9, this is from the Centers for Disease Control. Headache, fatigue, fever, muscle soreness. Well, you know what? Problem is, you can catch it from another person when they're in this stage, which is kind of unusual for illnesses, that you're already a carrier at a very early stage. But the thing is, this could mimic anything. I mean, I think most of us in the last year or two at least have had an illness where we've had a headache, you feel tired, your fever's a little up, and your muscles are sore. That sounds like the regular flu or any number of other little viruses you can catch. Heck, I mean, some women, when they get pregnant, they have these symptoms. But anyway, those are the first symptoms. That doesn't sound too scary. Day 10, sudden high fever, vomiting blood, and very passive behavior. So you go into a lethargy, and you're spitting blood up. Now that's where it gets X-Files. That's where it gets really, really like, oh my gosh, I don't want this. Okay. Day 11, not just one day just one extra day. Bruising, brain damage, bleeding from the nose, mouth, eyes, and anus. So your orifices are spurting blood. I guess from the lack of oxygen, you can get the brain damage. I don't know if that's the case, or maybe it's some sort of swelling. I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe a toxin. But essentially, this is what we usually think of with Ebola: the blood coming out of everywhere. And finally, day 12, final stages: loss of consciousness, seizures, massive internal bleeding, and ultimately death. Now, the thing is that, from my understanding, if you don't get any kind of medical treatment, then you're like the vast majority of people die of this. If you get really good medical treatment, it gives you a 50-50 chance. You got a halfway chance. Maybe if you have, I don't know, maybe in the developed world, if they're doing all that, sci-fi type stuff with you, maybe a little bit better than 50%. But that is not good odds. I mean, when we think of sicknesses, I have more than half of people that suffer a heart attack, I think, survive. This is something that's really scaring people, and rightly so. Now, the thing is, I just looking through my notes here. I took a lot of notes on this one, but one thing that I kind of liked was a presentation by Glenn Beck, and Beck had he had what he called like a 5-point plan that he thought would be good to implement. Now, the thing is, before I get into Mr. Beck, didn't Obama promise us a couple months ago, or maybe a month ago, that Ebola would not reach our shores? Another false prophecy. Yeah, if you can keep, if you like your health plan, you can keep it. The thing is that obviously that's not true. Now, I'd like to ask one question though before I go on. Seriously, I read that the Russians have sent medical volunteers down to these affected regions to try to help people in Africa and stem the tide of Ebola. Keep it concentrated and finally eliminated in the countries it's broken out in. Cuba, which is very well known for its advanced medical care. There's other things, of course, that might make it look a little bit less than wonderful, but it does have a very advanced medical program. They sent a couple hundred medical technicians, and Obama has sent 3,000 soldiers. Okay. When you sign up in the U.S. military, you don't think you're going into, again, X-Files or Andromeda Strain or, some sort of outbreak type scenario. And I guess if these were 3,000 medical personnel, I could see that. But 3,000 regular Joes off the street, just that signed up for the military, and you're shipping them over to an area that's a hot zone with a disease that can last in the human body in a contagious form. I've heard, over a month, and maybe some people suspect longer, depending on how it's transmitted. What are they going to do with these guys when they're when they rotate them? What if one of them gets sick? I mean, I'm not even talking about Ebola. Let's just say one breaks their leg, or I don't know, has an impacted wisdom tooth, or whatever, and they need to be shipped to one of the bases out of Africa to get medical care. Are they going to be quarantined? Are they going to be put into a special unit since they've been in the region? Since they've been so closely associated with the disease? And why in the heck are they sending them down there anyway? Is this just part of some sort of AFRICOM type thing? Show the people in the region that America's there in order to scare the Chinese? Or whatever, because right now Africa is the battle zone. It's not a hot war or anything, but right now it is a competition. It is a huge competition for resources. Africa is rich beyond your wildest imaginations. And, China is developing its economy. China just surpassed the United States as the largest economy. Now, of course, per capita income is nowhere near that of Europe and the United States. They have 1.4 billion people, and it's going to be a while before their per capita income can even come close to that of the United States and Western Europe. However, to get to that stage, they need to fuel their economy. And many of the oil that's been found in this region the minerals that are found in this region and other regions, and that's just what's been discovered so far, is astronomical. And China wants to get in there, get the contracts, and be able to build some sort of infrastructure in the area to extract those minerals and the oil and so forth. The United States also wants in there. So this is turning into a competition. Some people think that beyond the fact that Gaddafi in Libya, by the way, Libya had the highest standard of living in all of Africa before democracy was brought to them, and now it's a Hobbesian nightmare. I don't even know if you can say Libya exists as a nation. For the most part, it's a failed state. But aside from the fact that Gaddafi made the mistake of challenging the petrodollar, he also was striving to get the Chinese more into the region, so there'd be competition between the West and the East, and therefore the prices of minerals throughout Africa would increase, so that these people would get some of this money that will be made off the raw resources. So he was going to try to form like an African European Union type of organization. And he was going to give money to all governments that pledged transparency and would fight corruption. Well, that was a big mistake. Gaddafi was wiped out by the West for doing this. But still, the Chinese are in Africa. I was in Africa last year. No, I'm not sick. Don't worry. But I was in Africa last year, Central Africa. And there's a lot of Chinese and East Indian business people down there. Lots of them. And this is a region where they're just trying to play the capitalist game. Now, of course, in World War I, it was Germany, Austria, and the Ottoman Empire that were trying to play the capitalist game. And when they went up against the French and the British, who were able to use their influence to drag the Russians into the mess too, it caused World War I. Hopefully that won't repeat, but who knows. But anyway, just to kind of paraphrase Glenn Beck here, things he would recommend. Now, one is he thinks the government should really strive to educate the public about this disease. Maybe separate some of the fact and fiction. Maybe so that they also could see what a worst case scenario would look like and so forth, but understand the probabilities of that occurring. Comment on this. The problem we have with our crop of politicians today is they're not scientists. They're not doctors. And if they do find doctors and scientists, many of these people are part of the establishment. Now, I know that there's stuff out there that's like doom and gloom and, again, Walking Dead scenario for the world. And I don't buy that personally. At least I hope not. I don't think it's going to go that far. And there's others that make it sound like, no big deal. Well, I don't buy that either. Okay, I think it's somewhere in between, but it's not doomsday scenario. Unless, of course, it mutates and you get some strains, and as the numbers I think it's doubling every several weeks, the numbers double, because every patient in Africa, everyone that gets it, passes it to 2 people, and then of course that extends. Those 2 people each pass it to 2 people, and then now you've got 4 people it's been passed to who pass it to 2, and so on. If you want to see exponential growth in something, just look at your family tree back to 1600. It looks like that. 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 16 great-grandparents, and 8 great-grandparents, and 16 great-great, and so forth. It just keeps going up, unless you're a member of some royal family or some parts of Arkansas, I guess. But the thing is that you can get an idea of how things expand. by just looking at those figures, and that's scary. And there was some virologist in Germany that was saying that this could take up to 5 million lives. Most of them, of course, will be in these countries. The problem, unless it's dealt with, unless you send massive amounts of aid and medical teams down to squash this epidemic. And I'll note one thing about this: the more people you have with it, the more people whose bodies will incubate this. And then as it incubates the virus, you do get a higher chance of transmission. But anyway, I don't think we're heading for a Walking Dead scenario. But then again, why not play it safe? And also, if you're one of the few people that does catch it, well, statistics don't matter then, do they? Now, the one thing I really like: restrict travel, then restrict or ban travel from Liberia. And the thing is, well, it's from people coming from those things, but you'd be restricted on your way back. And anyone that's been there, like for instance our soldiers, should be in some sort of quarantine for at least 25 days. And of course, maybe people, should consider that this is not something new. It's not some sort of weird, politically incorrect type thing to do. Nigeria has put bans on people. Kenya has banned people traveling from or through Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia from entering their country. Cameroon has suspended all. I'm not talking about the British dude, but the country of Cameroon has suspended all flights from all the Ebola-affected countries, and you've got other countries whose airlines are they're restricting the airlines to and from. I saw somewhere, I think Colombia and St. Lucia is barring visitors from countries that have Ebola outbreaks. And one thing I found interesting was with St. Lucia. They just said they're a small country. They're an island nation. They're a little country. They don't have lots of money, and to treat someone with Ebola, it costs a tremendous amount of money. Okay? Look it up on the internet, what you have to do to treat someone. Take a look at what they're having to do to treat this nurse in Texas. We can hope she survives, but the thing is, it's a lot. And I've talked to nurses before when they're working with infectious diseases, and you would not believe how much of the equipment sometimes, and I don't know if it's going to be with Ebola, but some of the really super bacteria that's coming in, mainly from the developing world. Someone has it, they put them into an isolation in a hospital, and they have to strip the walls, and that's all biohazard afterwards. I mean, everything that person could have come in touch with, or the bacteria or virus or whatever could have gotten on, you have to get rid of it. Small countries cannot afford that. That's very, very expensive. And so that's why countries like this are going to be restricting, and you're going to see more, I think, poor countries. I think you're going to see way more poor countries restricting travel. Not because they're heartless or anything. Certainly not because they're racist. Obviously, most of the countries I've listed here are African, aside from Colombia, St. Lucia. But the thing is that it's going to cost a lot of resources, and these countries don't have those resources. And again, I think even reporters, even journalists, even medical people should be in quarantine for about a month. I'll agree with Beck here about the 25 days. That's not unreasonable. Okay. Then direct as much energy, emergency funding, and resources as possible. No problem there. I mean, these are human lives. I think that we need to put money into protecting human lives. Prevention's always the best cure. But if someone's got it, then we need to treat it. We need to help these people. Then, of course, nurses and need protocol, and they have to have the stuff that they need in the hospitals so that a nurse doesn't have to worry that if he or she goes in to treat a patient, that they may wind up with this disease themselves. We can't ask that of our medical personnel. I mean, to catch this is not one of those things where, okay, I might get sick, and then I can just try to fight it. I'm a healthy person. No, you can't ask medical personnel to do that. I certainly wouldn't want to do such a thing. I mean, this is a very deadly, very, very deadly disease. Now, I was looking at a map, and it was on a website, Vox, and it was saying where you may have Ebola going next, and of course, it lists the United States through air travel. It also lists China. Now, China, I think, is a country that will probably put in. They don't worry about any kind of, what some people would call civil rights or fairness or anything like that. When I went to China a few years ago, it was during the SARS scare. I researched it. I was like, okay, come on, this is not that dangerous. I was in an area that was a real hot zone, southern China. But when I arrived in Beijing, we had to walk through thermal scanners, and they could tell if you had any kind of disease. And that was one of the rare times I got a flu vaccination, because if they found you had a fever, they might not let you come into the country. So I didn't want to take that risk. So I got a flu vaccination. Didn't come down with the flu or anything like that, fortunately. I know a lot of times you get the flu vaccination and then you get sick. I know a lot of people that got that when they got the swine flu shot. I didn't get it, but a lot of people took the shot and they wound up getting sick. I was around some people that had the swine flu. I started getting a little bit sick, and then I went out for a jog or something. It went away. It went away. Then I was around people that had it and didn't catch it. But I did not get the vaccination. But some of the people I know who did get the vaccination, they were pretty sick afterwards. But anyway, China may have a lot of danger because they have so many people in Africa. I don't remember if it's 1 million or 2 million Chinese are currently in Africa. Whether they have moved there and set up farms. A lot of them get into chicken farming. Don't know why, but chicken farming is very popular, and many of them have gone there. And of course, many Africans think that this is unfair, that they come in and start competing with the local people. But anyway, these people go back and forth to visit family, or you have business contacts. You may have people down there working for oil companies in China, or mineral companies, or just salespeople going down there. And of course, it listed Britain and Germany as hubs in Europe. Now, the thing is that, again, I think China will have a very no-nonsense approach, but their medical facilities may not be up to par with having a lot of people with this. I've been in medical facilities in China, and I know they're advancing, and they're advancing rapidly, but I seriously would not want to be sick in China, and especially when you have something like this. The same would be true of India. If maybe some people went in from India, but probably they're going to screen people very, very, very carefully. Also says a lot of people in these countries may travel to countries like South Africa, and at least South Africa does have a fairly advanced infrastructure and advanced medical facilities, so that might be okay. Now, but I still think, why? It sounds cruel, but why should we have people going in and out of an area that such a deadly disease exists? Now, again, it's true that there's not that many people with it so far. Okay, on the scale of things, thousands of people in Uganda die every year of malaria. I mean, that's one thing. I was scared. I took the malaria pills. I coated myself with mosquito repellent. I was in some very rural areas. I did not want to get malaria. Okay, that's a much greater risk in these countries. Many more people die of malaria. But that being said, again, this is a new disease, and people are kind of scared about what could happen with it in the future. I'll get back to that in just a moment. Now, the other thing that I wanted to deal with is the idea when it comes to infrastructure and the fact that these countries, why we should probably be putting a lot of money and effort into trying to cure the problem there. Again, we're not just saying shut off Africa, build a big wall around it, and let the people suffer through it. We should send aid. That's just I'm not going to say nice thing, but it is more of a humanitarian, especially if you come from a religious background, try to help people when they're suffering. And one of the reasons we really need to get a handle on this, I was looking at an article in The Guardian that women are the ones who are really catching this. And it's interesting why it would be that in those societies, women are the ones who are in charge of the family. They're in charge of taking care of the sick. And then ultimately, when someone dies, most of these places, the people in the rural areas can't afford a mortuary in the same way we would see taking a body and doing embalming and stuff like that. So they dress the body, prepare it for funeral and that sort of thing. Well, this means they may be in exposure to the virus through victims of the virus. And if it gets into the women, then, of course, that's going to leave a lot of orphans. Women are very instrumental in those countries, keeping smaller farms going along with their husbands. It's really, pretty much the women in those areas, they do all the work with the kids and a lot of the work with the livestock and the agricultural produce. And so if they're the ones that are dying at a much higher rate than men, then this could create an infrastructure problem even greater. And the problem is, if this area becomes poorer than it is today, then that leaves it open for more disease in the future. Diseases such as this thrive in areas where people don't have the right sanitation, the right medical care in order to stop something in its tracks before it causes problems. And so if the area gets poorer and poorer, that means illnesses that are endemic to the region are going to have a better chance of mutating and spreading, and we may get a new type of Ebola come along. And I've seen a lot of experts who've been saying that you got about a month and a half or 2 months to stem this. And if it doesn't, people are just going to spread out, and which is natural. I mean, if you're scared, you're going to try to go somewhere where it's not. And you may be a carrier. Okay, you may be spraying it to other people for that 7 or 8 days or whatever. That's not good. That's going to cause a lot more death, disease, destruction. And it's going to leave the area vulnerable to even more disease in the future. So I would say, instead of sending, my personal opinion is, instead of Obama wanting to send $500 million to fund terrorists in Syria, so they can, the so-called freedom fighters who, right? I mean, I saw a documentary the other day. It said that the Kurds are being shot by ISIS and the group that we say are the good guys, the FSA, instead of that $500 million being sent over to help these guys on some sort of weird pretext that maybe they'll be a buffer zone, they'll fight ISIS, take that $500 million and put it into trying to get rid of this disease and helping people, so that we don't have to worry that it's going in our global economy, that something like this can go global. You see, that's the thing. That's one of the aspects of globalism. 20, 30 years ago, it was kind of unheard of to be thinking, I maybe go to this other country and start a business or do that sort of thing. Now it's becoming very common. And the thing is, you're no further away than a plane ticket to just about anywhere in the world. And so we have air travel, we have other types of travel that are opening the world up. And when you open the world up, you're also opening up the possibility of disease. So it's in everyone's best interest, really, if we can get rid of this. So again, maybe you should write your congressman and senator, or you know what? A lot of them are out there begging for your votes right now. They're out there saying, please vote for me and help me to save America. You got the Democrats and Republicans. Ironically, have you noticed the Democrats, if you ask them, did you vote for Obama in 2012? They're kind of like, hey, let's talk about sports. Let's talk about global warming or something. They try to find some way to avoid answering that question. But what you should do is maybe confront them at their town halls. Confront them and say, hey, that money that they want to send over to help the guys that are fighting Assad, who ironically is also fighting ISIS, who for the last year and a half or 2 years has been the only one bombing ISIS targets? It's Assad, the guy that Obama wanted to bomb and take out of power last year at this time. Remember that? Short-term memory in the United States. Most people don't remember that. And Putin kind of stepped in there and caught Kerry, and they had to kind of stop that idea. But just suggest that. Just suggest, if you're on a social network or if you're at a town hall or your politician has a Facebook page, that money that they want to send over there to help these guys who, they're allies with these terrorists that are killing the Kurds and trying to take over the region. This money could be better spent helping Africans. Put it in that context and see how your liberal friends deal with that one. They'll be like, because they worship the government right now in Obama, but at the same time, they don't. They do have hearts. They don't want to see people suffer. So just say, hey, look, instead of causing suffering in Syria, why not we take that money and help people not suffer in Africa? So anyway, in this case, we need to get this under control so it doesn't explode. I personally would like to be able to get on an airplane and not worry that the guy going behind me. I'd rather, if he's got the flu, okay, that means I might catch it, and I might be sick for a day or two. I don't catch the flu very often, but in this case, I was like, I don't know if the guy has Ebola. Anyway, some of the things you can do to take precautions to protect yourself. Now, I've seen a variety of articles about this. First of all, again, your chances of catching Ebola are so small right now. I wouldn't be stressed. Would I put food away and provisions and stuff like that? I'd do that anyway. Come on, take some advice from the Mormons. They have like a year's supply of food. At least if they're trying. I don't know, maybe nowadays it's not so big. But anyway, try to take some advice from them. Is it going to hurt to have food stored away? Remember when the CDC a couple of years ago was saying, hey, if you're, they were joking around, I think, if we're all prepared for a zombie apocalypse, that'll prepare us for all the other disasters that can come. Well, maybe being prepared for an Ebola apocalypse, which I don't think is going to come, but if it did, you'd be prepared. They laughed at Noah, okay? I'm sure they were watching him. I still contend they were watching him on whatever kind of social media they had in those days too, whether it was television or whatever, thinking, oh, look at that idiot out there. He's been out there 150 years building that boat. And then, of course, when it all came down, that was the end of them. So, but anyway, the CDC says here's what you should be doing to protect yourself. Wash your hands frequently or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Anytime I go to China, I do both. But, one time I didn't. I went out to a popular, I won't name the name of the restaurant. It's an American restaurant. And I chose just to wash my hands and not use the alcohol sanitizer along with a British friend. And we both got really sick. Not flu, but, something that was quite unpleasant for a couple hours. Anyway, avoid contact with blood and bodily fluids of any person, particularly someone who is sick. You know what? I don't think I have to be reminded of that. Okay, I mean, I've had CPR training and first aid training, those kinds of things, but I'm not too sure I want to come in contact with people right now. I'm sorry, unless I know them or something. But anyway, avoid contact with blood and bodily fluids of any person, particularly someone who is sick. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. Do not handle items that may have come in contact with an infected person's blood or body fluids. Now, this is interesting. You see someone sneeze or wipe their nose on their hand, and a few minutes later they're using a pen or pick up a book or something, and they set it down. I've actually heard that the number one vector for getting the flu, for instance, a virus, is not like something like kissing. You can't catch from my understanding at least, you can't catch the flu kissing someone. But what it is if it gets on the mucous membranes of the nose or the eyes, because it's very thin skin and it's not as protected. And so if you're on a bus and you touch a seat that someone has sneezed on or put some sort of fluid on there of some sorts, don't even want to think about that, but you never know. And then your eye itches, and you rub your eye, or you're kind of disgusting and you stick your finger in your nose or something in public. Well, anyway, if you do that, you can get any number of viruses into you directly. And that's how you catch these things. That's why in the wintertime there's so many diseases, because everyone's enclosed. In the summertime you're out and about, and there's more ventilation and things dry out and better and stuff. In the wintertime things don't dry out so much. You touch a handrail if you're like in a city and you use the trains or the metros or something, and you just think about all the hands that have been on that. I remember when I rode the subways in Moscow. Really nice subways, except, it's like really nice and decorative. But 10 million people ride those a day. And you know what? I don't think they clean those handrails, very much. I mean, you can't, because there's so many people there. So they clean these things at night. The thing is, think about 10 million hands, where those hands have been, and they're touching the various items, such as the handrails. And how many people put their hands on those, and then they put their hands on their eyes, for instance? Oh, gosh. Ooh. I bet you if you took a bacteria or virus sample in a toilet, it would have far less, because at least there it flushes, than you would in these kind of things. So if you do go to those places, just keep your hands clean, and if your eye itches, rub your sleeve or something against it. Do not touch the body of someone who's died from Ebola. Again, you don't have to remind me of that one. Do not touch bats and non-human primates or their blood and fluids, and do not touch or eat raw meat prepared from these animals. Okay, well, I've eaten a lot of exotic foods, especially in China when I've been there. Some stuff in Africa, but never had bat on a stick or monkey on a stick. So, yeah, I don't think that's a problem. Avoid hospitals where Ebola patients are being treated. Yeah, okay. isn't it that we were told that this wasn't going to be a big problem? And now there's, you got the avoid hospitals where patients are being treated. Of course, they're talking about the foreign countries, but you know what? What about the people being treated in the United States? There's people in hospitals, that are now in the United States with Ebola, and there's people there, I don't know, giving birth to babies and doing all kinds of stuff. I think I'd rather be safe than sorry, and personally, my idea for quarantine or treating, I think maybe just put the money into taking an old barge and, equipping it, kind of like, you ever see the movie Resident Evil 3 or 4, where they had the big barge that had, like, what was left of the human race on it? Maybe making a barge into, like, some sort of quarantine situation. Make it really advanced so that people can be flown in by helicopter, and you have the most advanced, expensive materials on that thing. But I think we could go back to that. They did that in the old days for smallpox and stuff in cities. If you had a really bad outbreak starting, you had quarantine ships. That was in the 1800s. So maybe something to consider. Seek medical care immediately if you've developed fever. Oh my gosh, I feel sorry for a lot of doctors now, because they are going to get hit with so many people that are going to be doing the hypochondriac thing when it comes to Ebola. And 99.99999% are not going to have Ebola. Limit your contact with other people until and when you go back to the doctor. Do not travel anywhere else besides a healthcare facility if you've been there. And according to the CDC's, U.S. citizens should avoid all non-essential travel to Guinea, Liberia, or Sierra Leone, and take enhanced precautions when visiting Nigeria. Okay, well, I wasn't planning on going there anyway, but anyway, these are kind of the things that maybe we should really, really consider. Now, I'm going to take a little detour from this whole Ebola thing for the next 10 minutes, and I'm going to say this. I think that if you look at a graph of what kills people nowadays, Ebola does not even register on a worldwide basis yet. But again, like I said, it's an X-Files type of disease. So it's something that's, people saw, things similar depicted on these kinds of TV shows. Now, of course, you hear about Ebola, and then you see, all the weird stuff that happens to the body of someone who has Ebola. But let's think about this for a moment. Maybe we should start looking at prevention. And even if there isn't an epidemic, but I was just thinking about this. The people that live in regions where these kind of diseases break out, I would suspect their immune systems are actually quite strong, unless they're in poverty. And I mean poverty as in not getting enough to eat. But if you live in an area, nowadays they say a lot of kids may be developing allergies because their parents keep their houses too clean. And so they don't have a chance to build an immune system that's efficient. And, in the old days, kids, you let the kids play out in the chicken coop. You let them play. Their babies, they got outside and they were putting things in their mouth that was just absolutely disgusting. And also I've heard that kids actually have a natural desire, maybe it's like a mineral thing, that they'll put dirt in their mouth. And the thing is, this builds up immunity. And in the Civil War, get this, in the Civil War, they drafted in the North, they drafted men who were coming from the cities and men from the farms. Now, if you think about it, most people would think, oh, those farm boys probably, did pretty good. Good husky guys out there, they did a good, decent day's work. And of course they did in the factories in the cities too, child labor. But, who died when the diseases broke out? It was the farm boys. And the reason was because in the cities, people were exposed to just horrendous illness. If you actually saw what those, everyone thinks of these wonderful, like, oh, Jane Austen novels, how neat it would be to live back in those days, and the horses and carriages. You don't know what it looked like in those days, okay? You had animals rotting in the streets. Even the castles that people lived in Europe, the animals were kept in those castles often, and they were slaughtered in those castles. The conditions were horrible. Remember, toilet paper wasn't even invented until, what was it, 1880? So just think about a few of those things for a moment. And then you think about all the diseases, the cholera and smallpox and all these other things. I mean, for those that weren't vaccinated yet. I mean, they did have vaccinations, but there was people coming in, immigrants and stuff from countries where they had not had vaccinations. So you still had outbreaks. And the thing is, the farm guys had lived in a pretty clean environment, had usually clean water from a well or a stream, and they didn't get exposed to disease as much, and so they died much easier. Now, those people in Africa, I guarantee you, they've had exposure to a lot of stuff because of the living conditions in many of these countries. And you take our highly sanitized American culture, where you wrap everything up in plastic and no human hands touch that food, and then you microwave it, and people are just, vaccinated up, down, and sideways. And think about if something comes along where there's no vaccine and the immunity has not built up in people. Well, I'm not sure what's going to happen then. But, you take a look at, you go shopping at Walmart or something. I'm not dissing Walmart. I'm kind of just talking about a sociological phenomenon that most people in the world look at. But are those people that you see at a Walmart or a fast food joint? Look around you. What if an epidemic of any sort breaks out? What if a societal breakdown takes place that has nothing whatsoever to do with Ebola or any other disease, but just happens from some other reason? How long will those people survive? Okay, how long do you think those people will make it? What skills do they have to survive? Aside from knowing how to pick up their iPhone and push in things and play games and look at kitty cat videos and look at porn and all those kinds of things. The average American today, I don't think, is really up to par with surviving a major outbreak of disease, nor a breakdown in the social fabric. So, I don't know what Michelle Obama's, I don't like her school lunch thing or anything, but, at least she's tried to get people to think about obesity. I don't know if it's had any effect. I doubt it. But have you ever thought about the fact that maybe the healthier you are, like, for instance, the best way to avoid a flu is be on an exercise program? You ever notice how very few people who are on a running program, a regular running program, ever get sick with the flu? There's other things associated with it. Getting enough rest, that's a good one. Exercise, get enough rest. This might be something that'll please you. The more sex a person has, I'm hoping that they're married. If they're not, then we're worried. We gotta worry about other diseases. But a higher level of sexual activity with your husband or wife can really boost the immune system naturally. Then there's vitamins people can look into, explore what vitamins do, which vitamins are best for them. And this has nothing to do with even just trying to avoid the flu. There's things, you can do that will keep you from catching the flu, or at least reduce the amount that you catch. And that's pretty, sunlight. Sunlight will increase your vitamin D, which will increase your immune system. So we're basically saying, maybe the hippies are right. How many times do you hear hippies getting the flu? I grew up in an area that had a lot of hippies. Oh my gosh, they're like the healthiest people. And I always wondered, How in the world, if they're smoking all that stuff and doing all this other things, how can they be so healthy? But they are. I mean, they're very healthy. They're a testament to living, at least trying to kind of keep yourself in shape. Maybe it might have something to do with your organic food. I don't know. But 30 years ago, what's organic today, 30 years ago was regular food. Okay, think about that for a moment. Now, I'm not saying you just got to eat organic food. I'm not saying it's a bad idea either, but think about it. Get on an exercise program. Oh my gosh, if nothing else, you'll be in better shape for when things fall apart. And I can tell you, if you're out of shape, you're not going to have the same mental stamina, alertness, your depression levels will go up and so forth. You gotta get yourself in shape, and try to get your family working on it too. Build up some food storage, at least a month. Okay, I'm not saying, and how much is that really? Pretend like, look how much you shop for in 1 month. Just make a list. Then look at what things could be stored in your closet somewhere. Some people I've known have had food storage underneath their beds and under the stairway and stuff like that if they have limited space. But take a look at what you buy in 1 month. And then kind of supplement a little bit, since you can't store milk very easily for a month. And just have a month of food, rice and wheat and canned foods and stuff like that. Have that at least a month's supply. Start with a month. If you can't go beyond that, at first, I know it's difficult. But think about how if suddenly you went to the store and it was empty today, how long would your family survive? And then what would you say when your kids are saying, "Mom, Dad, why didn't you buy more food when we had food?" I don't know if you want to be answering those questions. But, essentially, yeah. Just try to get yourself as healthy as you can at whatever stage of life you're in. Some people, it might just be just trying to walk a little bit around the house if they're really old or really in bad shape. But younger people should really look into doing what they can to improve their bodies, because your body is a machine. It's just like your car. If you don't keep your car in maintenance, it'll fall apart on you, and so will your body. So try to keep it in utmost condition. And if things fall apart and your car still works, that's going to be a huge advantage. Think about that when it comes to the body. Get some food storage. Try to avoid illness, as much as possible. Learn about the illnesses. And don't just take one person's word for it or whatever. Try to find out what's going on out there. What is, just be informed. Just be informed. And don't necessarily just look at the mainstream media. Oh my gosh, try to be informed in a positive way. Anyway, that's my hopes and wishes. I hope that if you're listening to this on YouTube in the future, you're not going, "Well, yeah, you were wrong. See, there was a huge Ebola outbreak, and there's mass disease and despair out there in society." I hope that's not the case. I hope we don't. I hope we can contain this. But we need to take the precautions and not just hope that things will just work out, because we're America, and on TV it always just works out. Anyway, take care. Visit my YouTube channel at Michael Cross. Come on back next week, and hope to have a really good show for you then as well. Take care, and God bless. Bye now.
In a Quinnipiac University national poll, a plurality of voters say President Barack Obama is the worst president since World War II. 33% of voters think the current president is the worst since 1945.
For more news, visit pigminenews.com.
This is Ozzy Skateboard,